The human vessel Starlight drifted to a halt as the emergency protocols engage. Commander Park stood frozen at the command console, his eyes wide at the spectacle before them. The vast darkness of space had suddenly transformed into a chaotic display of destruction that stretched as far as the eye could see. "Status report," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the low hum of the ship's systems. "Sir," replied Officer Kim, her voice steady despite the shock. "We appear to have emerged in the middle of a space battle. Sensors detect over 8,000 vessels engaged in combat." Through the view screen, they watched as energy weapons crisscrossed the void between two massive fleets. Brilliant beams of light, red, blue, and white, sliced through space. Ships exploded in silent bursts, becoming brief, bright stars before fading to nothing. The scale was beyond anything humanity had ever witnessed. The bridge crew stood transfixed. None of them had expected their routine test flight to end like this. The Starlight was humanity's first attempt at faster-than-light travel. They had only planned to jump a few light years, test the systems, and return home to Earth. No one had prepared them for this. "The experimental FTL drive worked better than expected," remarked Chief Engineer Lee, breaking the silence. His fingers flew across his console as he checked the readings. "We're approximately 80 light-years from Earth." Commander Park nodded, his mind racing through their options. They could attempt to jump back immediately, but the drive needed time to cool down. They could try to avoid the battle, but they were right in the middle of it. They needed information. "Can we identify the combatants?" he asked. Communications Officer Choi looked up from her station, her face pale in the blue glow of her screens. "We're picking up transmissions from both sides. Translators are working." Her eyes widened as data stringed across her display. "They appear to be the Morax and the Viren. According to what we're gathering, this conflict has been ongoing for..." She paused, double-checking her readings. "This can't be right. 800,000 years." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. 800,000 years of continuous warfare. It was almost impossible to comprehend. Human civilization had only existed for a fraction of that time. "Sir," said Tactical Officer Han, his voice cutting through the stunned silence, "I'm analyzing their battle patterns." His fingers danced across his console, bringing up complex visualizations of the battle. Despite their advanced technology, both sides are using remarkably predictable algorithms. It's like watching a complex but ultimately deterministic chess match. Park moved to Han's station, studying the patterns that were emerging on the screen. The officer was right. For all their advanced weaponry and massive ships, the two alien fleets moved with a strange kind of predictability. Each side seemed to respond to the other with moves that could almost be calculated in advance. "Their tactics show no innovation," Han continued. "They respond to each other with moves that seem predetermined. It's as if they're locked in a pattern they can't break. A pattern that's lasted for 800,000 years, Park mused. "No wonder the war hasn't ended." "I've run some simulations," Han said. "Based on their current tactics, this particular battle will end in a stalemate, just like thousands before it must have." Park's eyes narrowed. "And neither side has noticed us yet." "No, sir," Kim confirmed, checking her sensors again. "We seem to be beneath their attention threshold. Our ship is tiny compared to their vessels, and they're focused entirely on each other." The commander paced the small bridge, considering their situation. They were witnessing something extraordinary, the longest conflict in known history. Two vast civilizations locked in a war that had continued for longer than humans had walked upright. And somehow, against all odds, the Starlight had dropped right into the middle of it. In that moment, Park realized that humanity had something these advanced aliens did not: a fresh perspective. The human mind, evolved on a different world and shaped by different challenges, might see what these aliens could not. "Sir," Engineer Lee spoke up, "the FTL drive needs at least 6 hours to cool down before we can attempt another jump." We're stuck here until then. Park nodded, coming to a decision. Then we use that time. Choi, continue translating their communications. I want to understand why they're fighting. Han, keep analyzing their tactics. Look for weaknesses, patterns they might not see themselves. Kim, keep our shields at maximum, but power down weapons. We don't want to be seen as a threat. What's our plan, sir? Kim asked. We're going to observe for now, Park replied. But we may have an opportunity here. These civilizations have been fighting the same war for nearly 1,000,000 years. Maybe what they need is an outside perspective. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. They were a small ship with minimal weapons, far from home, in the middle of a massive alien conflict. But there was also an unmistakable spark of excitement in their eyes. The commander stood straight, his decision made. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth as he looked out at the ancient battle raging before them. Well then, he said with quiet determination, let's introduce ourselves. The Starlight held position at the edge of the massive battle, just far enough to avoid stray weapons fire. The small human vessel was like a tiny fish watching two giant whales fight, unnoticed but observing everything. Commander Park had ordered a full analysis of the conflict. For the past 6 hours, every member of the crew worked to understand what they were seeing. The ship's sensors recorded everything: weapons signatures, communication patterns, ship movements, and the rare transmissions they could intercept. In the ship's main conference room, the senior officers gathered around a holographic display. The room was dim except for the glowing 3D model showing both alien fleets in miniature. It's fascinating, said Science Director Yoon as she manipulated the display with gentle hand movements. The hologram zoomed in to show detailed scans of ships from both sides. Both species evolved in nearly identical environmental conditions despite being from different star systems. She brought up biological scans. Their bodies evolved differently. But look at these brain scans we've managed to capture. 2 alien brain structures appeared, rotating slowly. Their neural architecture is remarkably similar, leading to parallel development of tactics and strategy. Like convergent evolution, Park said, remembering his academy training. Exactly, Yoon nodded. But taken to an extreme level, it's as if they're playing chess against mirrors of themselves. Tactical Officer Han stepped forward, bringing up battle simulations. That explains the stalemate. Neither side can think outside the patterns the other can predict. The hologram showed thousands of ships moving in complex, but somehow predictable patterns. They can anticipate each other's moves almost perfectly. Park watched the simulation with growing understanding. So they'd been locked in this pattern for 800,000 years because neither side can surprise the other. Precisely, Han confirmed. They're both playing the same game with the same rules and same strategies. He pointed to several areas where ships clustered. Look here and here. Both sides make the same defensive formations when attacked. Both sides use the same flanking maneuvers. Commander Park frowned, considering the implications. And the casualties? He asked, turning to Communications Officer Choi. She looked up from her tablet, her face grim. Based on the historical records we're intercepting, conservative estimates put civilian deaths in the trillions over the centuries. The room fell silent. Trillions of lives lost. It was a number too large to truly comprehend. And that's just the direct casualties, Choi continued. Entire solar systems have been rendered uninhabitable. Countless species have gone extinct as collateral damage. The war has consumed resources that could have built utopias. Engineer Lee shook his head, his eyes sad. All this suffering because neither side can break from established patterns of thought. Park walked slowly around the holographic display, studying the battle from all angles. There must be some reason they continue fighting after so long. There is, said Choi. From what we've gathered, both sides believe the other will eventually exterminate them if they show weakness. It's become a fundamental belief in both cultures. It's almost religious now, added Yoon. Children are born, live their entire lives, and die knowing nothing but this conflict. The war has become their identity. The room fell silent again as the crew watched the silent holographic battle continue its deadly dance. Thousands of tiny ships moving in patterns that had been repeated countless times over the centuries. "Sir," interrupted a calm voice. The ship's eye appeared as a simple blue light pulsing at the center of the conference table. "I've completed my analysis of both fleets' formations. I've identified 7 critical weaknesses that neither side has recognized due to their identical tactical thinking." A hologram changed to highlight specific areas of both fleets. The first weakness is in their command structure. Both sides position their leadership vessels in nearly identical formations, creating a vulnerability that neither has exploited. The AI continued methodically identifying each weakness: predictable shield rotations, inflexible supply lines, inefficient energy distribution, blind spots in sensor coverage, and more. Park studied the display with growing interest. "How confident are you in this assessment?" 99.8% certainty, Commander," replied the AI. "Human unpredictability gives us a unique perspective they lack. Our neural architecture developed under completely different evolutionary pressures. We see patterns they cannot." The implications were clear. The tiny human vessel, with its crew of just 23 people, had identified in hours what 2 advanced civilizations had missed for millennia. "We could end this," whispered Engineer Lee, voicing what everyone was thinking. "Or make it worse," countered Security Chief Kang, speaking for the first time. "We're one small ship, far from home, with no backup. If we intervene and fail, we could bring the wrath of both sides down on Earth." Park nodded, acknowledging the risk. "But if we succeed, we could save countless lives and possibly gain powerful allies." The hologram continued its silent display of destruction as the officers looked to their commander. The weight of the decision was visible in Park's eyes. His ship had not been sent on a diplomatic mission. They were explorers, scientists, test pilots. Yet here they were, with the potential to alter the course of galactic history. "Then we have a choice to make," Park said quietly, his gaze moving from one officer to the next. "Do we observe, or do we act?" No one spoke, but the answer was clear in their eyes. They had not come this far, crossed so many light years, to simply watch. They were humans, unpredictable, innovative, and unwilling to accept that something couldn't be changed. The commander straightened his uniform. "Prepare a communication to both fleet commanders. Let's see if they're willing to listen before we show them what they've been missing." The bridge of the Starlight was silent as Commander Park stood before the communications array. His crew watched, their faces a mixture of hope and doubt. They had spent the last hour preparing what Park would say to the alien commanders. "Ready, sir," said Officer Choi, her finger hovering over the transmit button. Park nodded, took a deep breath, and began speaking in a clear, firm voice. "This is Commander Park of the Earth vessel Starlight. We request an immediate ceasefire and offer to mediate peace talks." The message was broadcast on all frequencies to both fleets. For a moment, there was no response. The crew held their breath. Then the communications panel lit up with incoming transmissions. A harsh, grating voice filled the bridge. "This is Supreme Admiral Morax. Your vessel is insignificant. Do not interfere in matters beyond your comprehension." Before anyone could react, a second voice cut in, smoother but equally dismissive. "This is Grand Commander Vurin. Your primitive craft is noted but irrelevant. Remove yourselves from the battle space." The messages ended as abruptly as they had begun. Officer Choi switched off the communications panel with a sigh. "They've both returned to ignoring us, sir." Park wasn't surprised. A species locked in the same pattern for 800,000 years wouldn't change course because of one message from an unknown ship. But he had hoped for better. "They didn't even consider our offer," said Engineer Lee, shaking his head. "Why would they?" replied Security Chief Kang. "To them, we must look like children who wandered into a war zone." Commander Park turned away from the communications array. "Show me what you found in their secure transmissions," he ordered. Officer Choi nodded and brought up the data on the main screen. For the past few hours, the Starlight's advanced decryption systems had been working to break into the secure channels used by the leadership of both fleets. What they found painted a disturbing picture. The screen filled with internal communications from both governments. Text scrolled past, translated by the ship's computers. There were military orders, yes, but also political directives. Messages about resource allocation, population control, and propaganda campaigns. The evidence was clear. Both sides' leadership perpetuated the war to maintain power, using it to control resources and populations while ordinary citizens suffered. "This message here," said Choi, highlighting one communication from a Morax official. "It directs propaganda teams to exaggerate Viren atrocities to boost recruitment." "And this one," she continued, pointing to a Viren transmission, "orders the suppression of peace movements on 3 different planets." The crew read in silence, the truth becoming painfully obvious. The war had long ago stopped being about survival or ideology. It had become a tool for control. "There's more," said Science Director Yoon, bringing up another set of data. "Both civilizations have the technology to end resource scarcity. They could provide for all their citizens, but the war gives them an excuse to maintain strict rationing systems. The military leaders get rich," added Tactical Officer Han, pointing to financial records. "Both sides have wealthy elites who profit from weapons manufacturing." "They don't want peace," said Officer Kim softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "They need the war." The words hung in the air. The crew looked to Commander Park, whose face had grown increasingly grave as he studied the evidence. "Sir, what do we do?" asked Engineer Lee. "We can't force 2 massive civilizations to make peace." Park's expression hardened. His eyes moved from the screen to the view screen, showing the battle still raging outside. "No, we can't force peace," he agreed. "But we can force them to see the truth." He walked to the center of the bridge, his decision made. "These civilizations are trapped in patterns they can't break. They follow the same strategies, make the same choices, generation after generation." His voice grew stronger. "But we're not bound by their limitations." "What are you suggesting, Commander?" asked Security Chief Kang. "I'm suggesting we show them what they've been missing for 800,000 years," Park replied. "A new perspective, an unpredictable element that changes everything." "We're just one ship," Kang pointed out. "We can't fight both fleets." "We won't fight them," Park said with a slight smile. "We'll confuse them." He turned to Tactical Officer Han. "Those 7 weaknesses our AI identified. Can we exploit them without causing major casualties?" Han thought for a moment. "Yes, sir. We could disrupt their command structures temporarily, cause confusion rather than destruction. And those secure transmissions about the war profiteering and propaganda," Park continued, looking at Officer Choi. "Can we broadcast them to all ships in both fleets?" Choi nodded slowly. "Yes, Commander. But it would mean breaking through their communication security. They might see it as an attack." "It is an attack," Park replied. "An attack on their control of information. Every soldier and crew member in both fleets deserves to know what they're really fighting for." The commander walked around the bridge, making eye contact with each of his officers. "I know this isn't what we came here to do. We're explorers, not revolutionaries, but we have a chance to end 800,000 years of needless death." He stopped at the center of the bridge again. "I won't order any of you to participate. This is beyond our mission parameters, and the risk is significant. If anyone wishes to object, now is the time." The bridge was silent. The crew looked at each other, then back to their commander. "We're with you, sir," said Engineer Lee, speaking for all of them. Park nodded, his expression serious but determined. "Then we'll have to show them what happens when a truly unpredictable factor enters their equation." He turned to his crew, his voice clear and decisive. "Prepare for intervention. We have one chance to end 800,000 years of pointless death. The Starlight's engines hummed with power as the crew strapped themselves into their stations. The small human vessel had been ignored by the two massive alien fleets, a mistake they were about to regret. Commander Park stood at the center of the bridge, studying the final intervention plan on his tablet. Every detail had been calculated, every move planned. They would only get one chance. All systems ready, Commander reported engineerly from his station. Tactical systems online, added Officer Han. Targeting parameters locked. Communications ready to broadcast, Officer Choi confirmed. Park took a deep breath and looked at each member of his crew. Their faces showed determination despite the fear they must have felt. They were about to challenge two ancient civilizations with technology far beyond their own. Execute maneuver sequence now, ordered Commander Park. The Starlight shot forward, its engines pushing to maximum capacity. The small ship moved with breathtaking speed, performing flight patterns that neither alien fleet could anticipate. They didn't fly in straight lines or standard attack formations. Instead, they looped and spiraled, changing direction in ways that defied the logical patterns both alien sides expected. On the main screen, they could see the confusion they were causing. Massive dreadnoughts turned slowly, trying to track the tiny human vessel as it darted between them. Energy weapons fired but missed by wide margins, their targeting systems unable to predict the Starlight's movements. They're trying to lock onto us, reported Officer Kim from the sensor station. But their targeting algorithms can't adapt fast enough. The Starlight slipped between two enormous Morax battleships, so close that the crew could see individual weapon ports through the view screen. Then they looped around a Viren command vessel, staying just out of reach of its tractor beams. First target approaching, called out Officer Han. Preparing electromagnetic pulse. The ship slowed just enough near a key Morax communication relay. A bright blue pulse shot out from the Starlight engulfing the alien structure. Lights flickered across the huge vessel as its systems temporarily overloaded. Successful hit, Han confirmed, moving to next target. The ship twisted away just as energy blasts tore through the space they had occupied moments before. Park gripped his command chair as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate for the extreme maneuvers. Status report, Park called out as the ship narrowly avoided destruction for the fifth time. 38 minutes elapsed, reported Officer Han, wiping sweat from his brow. Their predictive systems are completely overwhelmed. They can't target us effectively. The bridge shook as a near miss sent energy cascading across their shields. Shields at 62%, warned engineerly. We can't take many direct hits. Park nodded. They had known this would be dangerous. Continue with Phase 2. The Starlight changed course again, heading for a different type of target. This time, they approached command ships from both fleets, moving in a complex pattern that allowed them brief moments of proximity to each vessel's communication arrays. Deploying code packets, said Officer Choi, her fingers flying across her console. Inserting into both sides' command networks simultaneously. The small human vessel continued its dance through the battlefield, moving too quickly and unpredictably for the alien ships to track. Each time they passed near a key vessel, more code was transmitted, spreading through the alien networks like a virus. Engineer Lee looked up from his console, a smile breaking across his face despite the danger. The command network hack is complete. All weapon systems are showing temporary failures across both fleets. Throughout the vast battlefield, confusion spread as ship after ship found their weapons suddenly offline. Commanders barked orders that couldn't be carried out. For the first time in centuries, perhaps millennia, the battle rhythm was broken. Now, Officer Choi, ordered Park. Broadcasting the evidence now, said Officer Choi, transmitting to all vessels simultaneously. Across both massive fleets, communication systems suddenly activated without command. On thousands of ships, Commanding officers watched in shock as their screens filled with evidence of their own government's deception. Internal memos detailing propaganda campaigns. Financial records showing how war profiteers became wealthy while civilians starved. Side-by-side comparisons proving that both civilizations had developed nearly identical cultures, values, and even art forms, despite being told the enemy was utterly alien and incomprehensible. The Starlight slowed its frantic pace, moving to a safer position at the edge of the battlefield. The crew watched in tense silence as their plan unfolded. "Sir," said Officer Kim, breaking the silence, "we're detecting communication between mid-level commanders on both sides." "Show me," Park ordered. The main screen displayed intercepted communications. Ship commanders from opposing sides were contacting each other directly, bypassing their high command. The messages were hesitant at first, then increasingly urgent as they compared the evidence they had received. "They're verifying the information with each other," said Officer Choi, her voice filled with wonder. "They're sharing their own experiences that confirm what we sent." More communications appeared on the screen. Commanders discussing ceasefire coordinates. Officers arranging to meet. Entire battle groups announcing they would stand down. Park nodded, allowing himself to feel the first hint of hope. They see it now. The futility. The deception. "Sir, look," called out Engineer Lee, pointing to the view screen. Across the battlefield, weapons powered down one by one. The constant flashes of energy beams that had filled space for centuries began to fade. First one ship, then 10, then hundreds. "They're standing down," whispered Officer Han in disbelief. The bridge crew watched in amazement as 8,000 years of hostility began to unravel in mere minutes. Ships that had been trying to destroy each other now maintained position, weapons offline. "Sir," said Officer Choi, "we're receiving a transmission. It's addressed to us." From both sides. Commander Park straightened his uniform. "Put it through." On the screen appeared two alien faces, one Morax, one Viren. Mid-level commanders from opposing fleets, broadcasting together. "Unknown vessel," said the Morax officer. "We request your continued presence. There is much to discuss." The Viren officer nodded in agreement. "You have shown us what we could not see ourselves. Perhaps you can help us see what must come next." Park looked at his crew, their faces showing the same mix of exhaustion and pride that he felt. With a simple nod, he gave his answer. The smallest ship on the battlefield had accomplished what countless massive fleets never could. The war that had lasted 800,000 years was, at least for now, over. The grand meeting chamber floated in space, a hastily constructed neutral zone between the once warring fleets. Through its wide windows, the stars shone brightly, no longer obscured by weapon fire and explosions. Inside, hundreds of aliens from both civilizations gathered around a large round table. Commander Park stood quietly at the side of the room, watching as representatives from both the Morax and Viren approached the table. The Morax leader, tall with gleaming scales and 4 arms, carried an ancient ceremonial pen. The Viren diplomat, shorter with smooth blue skin and large eyes, carried a matching pen. Both were copies of artifacts from their shared ancestral past, created specifically for this moment. Together, they bent over the document spread across the table, the Peace Accord of Starlight. They had named it. With careful movements, each signed their name to the document. A cheer rose from the gathered crowd. Some wept openly. Many embraced former enemies. The noise was almost deafening. 50 minutes, mused Science Director Yoon beside Park, her voice barely audible over the celebration. That's all it took to end 800,000 years of war. Park shook his head slightly. "Not us," he corrected. "It was them." All they needed was to see outside their patterns of thinking. The human crew of the Starlight stood together, a small island of Earth uniforms in a sea of alien celebration. They looked tired but proud. None of them had slept in over 30 hours. The peace negotiations had been intense, with both sides struggling to break free of centuries of hatred and suspicion. But in the end, the truth had been too powerful to deny. Once the mid-level commanders had seen the evidence of manipulation, once ordinary soldiers had communicated directly with their supposed enemies, the war machine had begun to crumble. The high command on both sides had tried to regain control, but it was too late. Too many had seen the truth. A Viren diplomat approached Park. Bowing deeply in the human style they had quickly learned to copy. "Commander Park, your species has shown us something we never understood was missing. The ability to think differently may be the most powerful force in the galaxy." The Viren's large eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of deep emotion. "For centuries, we believed we were fighting because we were different. Now we understand we were fighting because we were too similar." Park nodded in understanding. The scientific analysis had proven correct. Both species had evolved in nearly identical conditions, developing similar thought patterns. They had been trapped in a loop of predictable actions and reactions with no way to break free. A Morax representative joined them, towering over the humans. Despite the size difference, there was no menace in the aliens' posture. "Commander, the newly formed Galactic Council wishes to extend formal invitation to Earth, not as warriors, but as mediators and innovators." The Morax gestured to the stars visible through the window. "There are other conflicts beyond our sectors, other species locked in their own patterns. Your perspective could change everything." Park looked at his crew, seeing the mixture of exhaustion and excitement on their faces. They had come to test an experimental drive, and had instead changed the course of galactic history. "I believe we would be honored to accept," Park said with a smile, "though we'll need to consult with our government first." The alien representatives seemed pleased with this response. They excused themselves to join the celebration, leaving the humans to watch in amazement as former enemies shared food, drinks, and stories. "I still can't believe it," said Officer Kim, watching a group of Morax and Viren soldiers laughing together. "Yesterday, they were trying to kill each other." "They're remarkably adaptable," observed Science Director Yoon. "Once they broke free of their thought patterns, they changed quickly." "Makes you wonder what patterns we're trapped in without realizing it," mused Engineer Lee. Park considered this idea. What limitations did humans impose on themselves without even knowing? What conflicts on Earth continued because no one could see outside established patterns? A soft alarm chimed on Officer Han's wrist device. "Sir, the engineering team reports the FTL drive is fully recharged and calibrated. We can depart whenever you're ready." Park nodded, taking one last look at the historic scene before them. Already, mixed teams of Morax and Viren engineers were dismantling weapons systems and planning joint scientific missions. The change was happening faster than anyone could have predicted. "I think our work here is done," he said. "It's time we brought news of our neighbors back to Earth." The crew made their farewells, accepting thanks and gifts from both civilizations. As they walked back to their ship, they passed what had been the front lines of the battle just 2 days before. Now it was being transformed into a memorial and peace park. As the Starlight prepared for its return journey to Earth, the crew gathered on the bridge for one last look. Through the view screen, they could see what had been a battlefield and was now becoming something new. The site of the first unified galactic peace summit. Ships from both fleets had rearranged themselves into a symbolic pattern, forming a massive ring around the peace station. Where there had been destruction, there was now creation. Commander Park settled into his command chair, feeling the weight of their experience and the importance of the message they carried home. "Set course for Earth," Park ordered. "We have quite a story to tell." As the stars blurred around them and the experimental FTL drive hummed to life, Park thought about how often the greatest changes came from the smallest actions. One small ship had changed the course of galactic history not through force, but through perspective. And now Earth would join a much larger community than anyone had ever imagined. The end.